Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair, committee members. Let me begin by accepting the amendments suggested in the analysis as author's amendments. So this bill deals with admission and disciplinary policies at our public charter schools here in California. And let me say right off that we have some extraordinary public charter schools in the state. I have a number of them, fortunately, in my own district. But the United States Department of Education and the United States Department of Justice have both raised some serious concerns, which I believe we need to address. This bill ensures that charter schools, as part of the statewide public school system, have non-discriminatory admission rules, as well as suspension and expulsion policies that guarantee students appropriate due process. California Education Code clearly states, quote, "A charter school shall admit all pupils who wish to attend the school," unquote. Charter schools are part of the single statewide system of public schools and therefore are not exempt from this mission. However, because of a confusing requirement in the Education Code that states charter schools should list admission preferences, if applicable, on their petitions, some charter schools have implemented discriminatory policies designed to allow only the most desirable students and to screen out students who may have lower standardized scores. A few examples of these discriminatory admission policies include mandatory parental volunteer hours, which you may have read about, also minimum English proficiency, and minimum grade point averages. These discriminatory practices harm students of color and students of low-income families. Data shows that low-income students, English language learners, and populations in need of special education services are served less often at public charter schools than at traditional public schools. This results in traditional public schools serving a disproportionate number of these students without any additional funding for them. These students deserve equal access to all public schools and should not have any barriers to their academic success. And then with regard to disciplinary policies, under current law, a charter school is not required to list in detail its policies for suspending or expelling pupils in its petition to become a charter school. Charter schools are also exempted from following the existing statutory due process protections relating to the suspension and expulsion of students at public schools. As a result, charter school students can be denied their right to due process. It's not surprising that the data collected by the United States Department of Education demonstrates that suspensions and expulsions occur at a far higher rate at charter schools than traditional public schools. This bill ensures that all of California students receive appropriate due process at public schools by requiring charter schools to follow the Education Code suspension and expulsion policies. The U.S. Department of Education and the U.S. Department of Justice have weighed in on both admission and disciplinary practices at charter schools. They have urged states to ensure that the civil rights and due process rights of all students are protected, and I believe it's time for California to listen. I would ask for your aye vote. We have a number of witnesses today. First, we have Dr. Julian Vasquez Heilig, Director of the Doctorate Program of Educational Leadership at Sacramento State.
Thank you, Senator. I'm honored to sit before you today. I'm also a former charter school instructor, parent, and board member. As a caveat, I must state I testify as a subject expert and not as a representative of CSU or my campus. My testimony will address two issues very quickly: the representativeness of charter school demographics and is SB 22 civil rights. I will begin by comparing charter demographics with traditional public schools. I'll utilize the most recent federal data obtained and licensed by the U.S. Department of Education by Dr. Francesca Lopez at the University of Arizona. You can conduct eyeball tests of various percentages between charters and traditional public schools in the state of California, but a recent study by Dr. Francesca Lopez using and let me be the stats professor just for a moment, an age statistical test to test the representativeness of different demographic groups in California was conducted. And what the findings show is that African Americans are actually highly overrepresented in charters across the state. Latinos are underrepresented, as well as ELLs, special ed, and free and reduced lunch. The other question I'd like to quickly address is SB 322, civil rights. The UCLA Civil Rights Project recently weighed in on SB 322 in an open letter that I posted on my education policy blog, Cloaking Inequity. They posited that there should be no exceptions in discipline for charter schools. They wrote, our published research supports the proposed changes offered by Senator Leno and SB 322. All public schools, including charter schools in California, should be monitored closely for due process and civil rights violations, as well as other data that may help or prevent unlawful exclusion. It's imperative that charter schools fully comply with all state and federal discipline requirements and charter guidance to ensure that the civil rights of students in California are not violated. SB 322 will help charter schools in California fulfill these goals. In conclusion, therefore, I concur with the UCLA Civil Rights Project in their support of SB 322. From Chile to Denver, the predominance of peer-reviewed research has demonstrated that choice can be problematic without regulation to ensure equity, access, and civil rights. SB 322 will ensure that authorizers and their charter schools remain accountable to California's communities and citizens. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Thank you.
Seth Bramble here on behalf of the California Teachers Association, proud to co-sponsor this important legislation. Truly what this legislation in part is meant to do is ensure that the admission requirements and preferences at charter schools are similar to what's permitted in the traditional public school environment. Some examples of some admission criteria, preferences, admissions requirements that we're seeking to eliminate in the charter school environment include, as was mentioned by the Senator, requiring volunteer hours. Recently, actually this year, Public Advocates put out a piece of research regarding they looked at 500 schools and they found essentially that 30% of those schools, my math is slow, that's probably like 165 schools or so, had volunteer hour requirements. Now, that may work if you had two parents and, you know, one was working and the other was home and was available to volunteer at the school. Some of these had up to 80, 90-hour requirements a year. So for a, you know, grandmother who's working two jobs and that family probably won't even apply to this school when they see this set of requirements. It's a deterrent when they actually see the application. One quick example, at Santiago Charter School authorized by Orange Unified School District, they require 12 service hours and that parents fill out a form indicating whether they would like to volunteer for those hours or donate money. Quote, for every $10 donated, you will receive 1 service hour credit. That's an example of the kind of discriminatory admission requirements we're talking about. A second one, academic. The Senator mentioned that also, that in some cases, particularly in San Bernardino, a charter school named Public Safety Academy made headlines this year about having a minimum GPA of 2.0 to get into the school. Now, in some cases, you do have magnet schools as part of a larger school that have a GPA, or we've seen GATE programs as part of a school. That's different from having a GPA requirement at, you know, the entire school, where the charter school physically is not letting people in who are not achieving well, particularly with respect to the fact that in '92, when charter schools were established in the state of California, one of the explicit purposes, and I'm reading from Ed Code about why charter schools were created, was to increase learning opportunities for all pupils, with special emphasis on expanded learning experiences for pupils who are identified as academically low achieving. So if you're meant to serve low achieving students, it doesn't make sense to have a 2.0 GPA bar. Increasingly, we've seen these admission requirements and preferences getting more and more creative. One of the most creative ones I saw was here locally at Natomas Charter School that has in their lottery policy, yes, it has a performing arts mission, and yes, they have auditions. I would suggest that as a taxpayer, and my son takes piano lessons, even if he was really horrible at piano, my tax dollars fund that school. He should be able to attend that school regardless of what his ability is at piano. But specifically in their preferences, they include a preference for elected advisor to the board. And I would submit, what is an elected advisor to the board? To me, what that means is a school board sits together and maybe they elect somebody whose kid gets a special preference to come into that school. Those kinds of creative preferences should not be allowed. They're discriminatory. And so what we're looking at here is and these are the result truly of like an hour of Google research on the internet. So if those are the ones that are public, you can imagine how many other types of admission criteria and preferences haven't been put out to the public and are also, limiting student access at charter schools. Charter schools are public schools. They must be available to all students. We urge your aye vote.
Catherine Williams with the ACLU of California. We're also proud co-sponsors of SB 322. We believe that this bill will provide basic protections for students in charter schools and ensure equal opportunity and fairness to each and every public school student in California. We share a lot of the same concerns that the Senator raised and CTA raised about admissions policies. They, in effect, exclude students of color and students from low-income families from attending charter schools, and they are a barrier to free and equal education in California, as is constitutionally guaranteed. We're also very concerned about the lack of due process protections afforded to students who face suspension or expulsion from charter schools. The only procedures that are required are those procedures that a charter school voluntarily elects to include in its charter. In contrast, traditional schools must follow statutorily prescribed disciplinary procedures. These procedures serve as basic protections. They ensure that a student is not suspended or expelled for reasons such as having a low GPA or for willful defiance. They serve to provide the right to be informed and to respond when the extraordinary step of a suspension or an expulsion is attempted. We can and we do work with students in charter schools to ensure that these discriminatory and insufficiently protective policies are erased. We know these policies are not formed out of malicious intent and are pleased when a school elects to resolve them with ease and immediacy. We are disheartened, however, by the fact that even a few of these violations have occurred and fear that many parents do not know or do not have the time to reach out to the ACLU or others for help. Thus, we see a real need for clarification in the law. We appreciate the unique educational experience that charter schools provide and believe that more clarity in the law will help charter schools to meet their unique educational goals without inadvertently excluding underserved classes of students. The legislature should step in to provide guidance when a student's rights are not secured. And for these reasons, we would strongly encourage your aye vote.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Ron Rapp from the California Federation of Teachers. We are a proud co-sponsor of SB 322. We believe that charter schools in California must not be allowed to create their own selective admission policies that prohibit students from enrolling or unfairly push students out who are already enrolled. As public schools funded with public dollars, charter schools must be held to the same admission policies as all public schools. In addition, charter school students must have the right to due process related to suspensions and expulsions. Research conducted by the Annenberg Institute for School Reform suggests that minority students are disproportionately suspended or expelled from charter schools. Oftentimes, students in charter schools are not afforded adequate due process rights in these disciplinary decisions. Finally, teacher turnover in charter schools is perceived to be high compared to turnover in other public schools. SB 322 will require school districts to collect data on teacher turnover so that the issue can be examined more closely. And for those reasons, we respectfully urge an aye vote.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. My name is Tristan Brown with the California School Employees Association. We are here in strong support this morning to ensure equal opportunity and due process for students in charter schools, the protection of which does not impact the quality of education in the classroom for these schools. So it's important to protect these tenets of public education and realize that they will only help students, not to hinder any educational delivery services. We urge an aye vote this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Mark Holtebeck, special education teacher at California Virtual Academy, one of the largest charter virtual academy school in the state. I support 322, especially with regards to the teacher turnover. Teacher turnover in charter schools is particularly high, especially with my school in particular, and it needs to be tracked to monitor.
Next, please.
My name is Jen Shilen. I am a charter school educator in support of 322. All students should have equal access to public schools. Thank you.
Peter Manette, I teach kindergarten in Nevada County at the Penn Valley School District. I urge yes on 322. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Leangela Reed on behalf of San Francisco Unified School District in support.
Thank you.
Good morning, Diana MacDonald. On behalf of California State PTA, we respectfully request your aye vote.
Thank you. Okay, any others in support of the bill? Those opposed to the bill, please come, oh, excuse me, yes?
Sorry, Michael Young, California Labor Federation, also here in support.
Okay. All right.
I apologize. Madam Chairwoman and members of the committee, my name is Willie Pelote, representing the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, where we represent a lot of classified school employees. This bill is important, and if you've taken the time to read Diana Ravage's book, American School System, you will absolutely see that even when they deny equal access to every child, they have failed miserably to outperform public schools who take every child. So it is time for the legislature to address the systemic disparity within the school system and support this bill, because it's a very important public policy to move forward, that if you're going to get taxpayers' dollars, then you're held to the same standards as those that then receive those dollars in the public school system. We ask for charter schools to be treated no differently and ask for the strong support of the members of the committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any others in support of the bill? Opposition, please come forward.
Madam Chair, as opposition has come forward, I just wanted to reiterate, as you were out of the room, that I've taken the amendments suggested on the bottom of page 6 as
Great.
author amendments.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, again, here 4 and lots of Me Too's. Okay, welcome to the
Thank you,
committee.
Madam Chair. Rand Martin on behalf of the California Charter Schools Association. I want to start with a couple of comments. One, we really appreciate the fact that the author has spent some time with us this week especially, and we really appreciate your work on this and your staff's work. We recognize that the amendments that the author intends to take to the first section of the bill relative to admission requirements and preferences is something that we have been neutral on in the past. We're taking one last look at it, but we feel optimistic. I do feel obligated to say, though, in response to the supporters, that charter schools do not adopt admission requirements and preferences unilaterally without oversight. They are part of the petition process. They must go to the school district, and the school district must approve them. So if there are preferences and if there are admission requirements, it must be done with the approval of the school district. A very important distinction that was not apparent in the supporter side of the presentation. The second piece of the bill has to do with the disciplinary policies. The proposal as it is right now would impose an additional 53 education code requirements on charter schools. When some re-regulation of charter schools is proposed, the first question out of our mouths always is, what's the justification? Demonstrate to us that there is a problem. So far, we have not been able to get information that justifies the problem. We have taken, in fact, we have witnesses here to talk about this. We have taken the data from CDE on suspensions especially. Expulsions data, unfortunately, is not as good as suspension data. We have used the same methodology that UCLA has done in their unreleased report. We've not even seen it. So if people are quoting it, we're not sure how they're quoting it. And have found that our experience with suspensions is actually better than traditional public schools. We suspend less students than traditional public schools. The references to national studies, keep in mind that we're a 50-state country, and those national studies are looking at all the 50 states. They are not looking at California specifically or exclusively. And so things that are happening in the District of Columbia, for example, which was referenced in the author's office's notes on the bill, or fact sheet on the bill, the District of Columbia is not the state of California, and what happens in DC does not happen in California. We feel very proud of what we do relative to disciplinary policies. And I should point out, once again, disciplinary policies are approved by the school district. They are not approved unilaterally by the charter school. And they are outlined in great deal. If anybody has ever seen a charter petition, it is not this thick, it is this thick. So all those things that are in 2 pages in the statute are actually in 4 or 5 2-inch binders, and they include expansive information on disciplinary policies. So if we can, if people demonstrate to us that there's really a problem, then let's talk about it. But that has not been demonstrated. We've asked repeatedly for data that justifies the need for this portion of the bill and have not received it. The last 2 items in the bill I'll hit very quickly. There are changes to the notification process where a student leaves the charter school. Again, we're not sure why that's necessary. Dropping the time frame from 30 days to 10 days is a challenge for charter schools. Anybody in education knows that there are times when students leave school and don't come back as fast as you would think they would. You're not quite sure where they've gone. Family emergencies, family vacations where the school is not notified. In 10 days, we don't necessarily know why the student left or whether the student's coming back. We're also concerned about handing documentation, confidential documentation to the school district if we don't know for sure that the student who does leave us is going to go to that school district. We're handing them student-level instructional data. We're providing them HIPAA data that is protected under state and federal law, and handing it to a school district when they don't know if the district is going to take that student is a liability against us and a liability against the school district. The last piece on teacher turnover, we actually think there might be something useful. We don't think it should be district level. We think the policies should be set at the State Department of Education and then have the districts implement. Otherwise, you're going to have 1,000 different data collections that may not match. You're not going to have any comparability for that data. We think if it flows from the state down to the district, you might actually get something that could be useful to everybody. For those reasons, at this point, we are opposed to the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Others in opposition?
Hello, Madam. Hello, Madam Chair and members, and thank you for letting me speak before you. My name is Alfonso Paz, and I'm the co-founder and executive director of Academic Performance Excellence Academy, aka Apex Academy, in East Hollywood area of Los Angeles. And I'm here to strongly urge a no vote on SB 322. I have over 27 years of experience in education in East Hollywood. Prior to Apex Academy, I was a teacher and counselor at LeConte Middle School across the street from our high school. In addition to my role at Apex Academy, I've been a proud part of the Charter School Association's working group on discipline in the charter sector. Our goal is to establish and share best practices in the terms of expulsion and suspension policies and to monitor how these charter practices influences. Apex Academy is a conversion charter high school in Los Angeles with 460 students. 98% of my students are Title I. 92% are Latino. The majority are first-generation immigrant families, and 1/3 of my population is at high risk and already in the criminal justice system. We welcome all students anytime, anywhere, and many come to Apex Academy because they have low credits or because other schools have pushed them out. We are heavily focused on restorative justice, and we have a policy of never expelling a student. We have had many success stories of our students that have turned our lives around, and here I have Peter Barahona, who will be speaking to you later. In the 5 years that Apex Academy has been open, our college eligibility rate has gone up to 63%. We give students hope and encouragement after many schools and individuals have turned their backs on them. Currently, as written, SB 322 will remove Apex Academy's ability to set our own disciplinary policies, and I would be forced to expel students. Students come to our school because other schools haven't worked for them. I would be forced to follow LAUSD's policy. This year, I had 3 LAUSD principals contact me to take their students, because if they had to follow the policy, these students would be out of LAUSD. I took all 3 students. All 3 students are currently enrolled, receiving social emotional counseling, and are attending. I urge you not to force Apex Academy to be like every other public school in LAUSD. Please allow us to continue to do our important work of helping troubled students turn their lives around, go off to college, get great jobs, and give back to their community. Through my involvement with CCSA's work group, I know that Apex Academy is not a singular example, but there are many charters that have also focused on restorative justice and who would be forced to change their discipline policies if SB 322 to become law. The previous speaker also discussed on suspension data of charter schools compared to traditional schools in California. In California, we are the same or slightly lower than traditional schools. Therefore, I see no need for further regulation. While I know a section of the bill on admission policies is being amended, I still would like to explain our admission policy. As I stated earlier, Apex welcomes all students anytime, anywhere. Our school follows a Diploma Plus model that has been proven to be highly effective with at-risk students in urban areas. This model continues high expectations for every student, rigorous competencies-based standards aligned approach with small personalized learning environment and opportunities to make real-world applications. Diploma Plus creates pathways to become successful adults by utilizing effective student-centered instructional practices, make use of technology, enhance teaching and learning, and provide tools and systems, specifically social-emotional counseling. Our ratio of counselors is 1 counselor to 150 students. The Diploma Plus model successfully transforms students' learning experience through the implementation of 4 essential successes: performance-based systems, supportive school culture, future focus, and effective supports. Far from being discriminatory, our admission policies and procedures that were reviewed and accepted by LAUSD then approved our charter. So please allow our students and parents to understand the culture of Apex Academy and determine whether our school is the best fit for them. This information is important, and we want to be transparent. As previously stated, everything in our petition was approved and reviewed by LAUSD before that school board approved it. Again, for these reasons, I strongly urge a no vote on SB 322. Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Good morning. My name is Pedro Barahona, or Peter. I'm a senior at Apex Academy High School. Before I tell you why you shouldn't vote on this bill or why you should oppose it, I would like to give you my personal story. I come from a neighborhood where you could wake up in the morning, walk down our sidewalk, and you could find a syringe thrown on the floor next to a bent spoon. I come from a neighborhood where you walk down the street and you would find new, fresh paint of gangs, of their rivals, crossing each other out, telling each other on the walls how they're going to kill each other. In my neighborhood, the fact that you could be someone successful as a doctor, lawyer, engineer, any other fruitful career like that is only a fantasy that you see on TV. Why? Because most of our parents are fresh immigrants here in this country. They didn't really have the opportunity to go to school and make something out of nothing. Hardworking parents sometimes work double shifts, sometimes aren't there enough for their kids. So what do these kids do? These kids turn to the streets, they turn to gangs, they turn to drugs to try to find something to fulfill that emptiness that they feel inside because they're left alone most of the time. When you don't have someone to guide you there and tell you what to do and what not to do, it's very hard to decide where to go. It's very hard to decide to do the right thing from the wrong. Now, when I started in high school, I started off at a public high school, LAUSD High School, out in Culver City, which is more west side, called Hamilton High School. I went to that school, my grades dropped. I was going through a very difficult time. My dad had just in and out of the hospital. Just moved in with my dad, lived with my mom the whole life. It was very tough. It was very hard, but that shouldn't be a reason as to why my grades dropped, but they did. My grades dropped, and I ended up moving back with my mom. When I moved back with my mom, I ended up attending Apex High School. Didn't know much about it. All I knew was that it was in a tough neighborhood that I had grew up on, neighborhood that I knew people that had been shot, killed, ended up in hospitals, or in jail. I went in there, and I met Mr. Paz. What they do at Apex Academy is that they give you a second chance. While other schools close the doors on you and tell you that you have no future, they open the doors and tell you that there's a second chance, that there's another way that you could be someone who you want to be and fulfill your dreams, that your dreams are something that is impossible to reach. They make sure that that's a possibility. I have seen kids turn around from being gangbangers, drug addicts, to to being these people that have dreams, these people that are college bound, university bound, the people that know what they want to do in life. I'm one of them. I started off high school with about a 1.8 GPA. I raised it up to a 3.0, 3.2. I know I could excel better, but it's the best that I'm doing right now, and I try every day. The only reason why I'm doing so well is because I have great mentors like Alfonso Paz, Mr. Lopez, and the rest of our counselors that we have. If this bill is passed, the doors are shut to give us a second opportunity to be someone that we want to be in life, to be able to make something out of nothing. So what do you do when all the doors are closed on you and you have nowhere to go? Where every other school that you try to go to says, oh, you've been expelled from a school already, we don't want to take you. And this charter school won't take you either because they have to follow the same regulations. Where do you go? So this is why I believe you guys should oppose SB 322. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair and members, my name is Dr. Elizabeth Robitaille, and I'm the Senior Vice President in charge of California Charter Schools Association's research and accountability efforts. As Mr. Paz referenced, our team of researchers has been working diligently with a task force of California charter schools to better understand suspension practices and statistics and to make recommendations that advance our goal for all California charter schools to be as inclusive and effective as possible. As also referenced, our research submitted to your committee finds that California's charter schools on average suspend students at the same or lower rates than do traditional public schools. Using publicly available data from the California Department of Education from the past 3 years, we see no statistical difference school-wide in average suspension rates for charters and traditional public schools. When we break this down by grade level, we see similar rates for elementary schools, but for middle and high schools, we see that charter schools have statistically significantly lower suspension rates than do traditional public schools. Moreover, for every single racial subgroup, the average rate of suspensions for charter schools is lower than traditional schools. In some cases, the differences are dramatic. For African American and Latino students, the out-of-school suspension rates in charter schools are only about half of traditional school suspension rates. If unfair suspension practices exist at individual charter schools, we absolutely believe the schools should improve and their authorizers should hold them accountable. However, requiring charter schools to follow 53 additional education code sections, ones that have led to the higher suspension rates in traditional public schools, is not an appropriate solution. I therefore ask for your opposition to this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, others in opposition, please identify yourself briefly.
Paul Kiefer, Pacific Charter Institute, please oppose SB 322.
Thank you.
Jody Graff, Visions in Education Charter School, please oppose SB 322.
Hi, Ruth Dutton. I'm from Sycamore Valley Academy in Visalia, California, serving 300 students. I strongly oppose your opposition to SB 322. As you heard, it's unnecessary, as suspension data from California charter schools is equal to or lower. In the case of my school, we compared our publicly available data where 1 out of 100 compared to district is 6 out of 100, so much lower in the case of my school. I want to reiterate the Education Code already requires California charter schools petitions to indicate what their suspension and expulsion policies are, so the issues raised of transparency and due process are not actual problems in California. Thank you.
Good morning, Lauren O'Neill, Executive Director of Odyssey Charter School, and I'm proudly serving the constituents of Chairman Liu's Senate District. I'd just like to add that in partnership with my authorizer, Los Angeles County Office of Education, we have we don't have any of those admission preferences mentioned earlier, and our suspension and expulsions policies closely align with the Ed Code, and that is all done in conjunction with the support of Los Angeles County Office of Education, and we appreciate their support over the last 16 years. Thank you.